The wheat fields on verdant. 7 grew in perfect rows, stretching toward the purple horizon like golden rivers. Owen Barrett walked between them with dirt under his fingernails and sweat on his brow. He had been doing this for 20 years, same as his father before him, same as his grandmother who first turned this moon's red soil into something that could feed people. The work was hard but honest. The land gave back what you put into it. That afternoon, the sky changed. Owen noticed it first as a shadow that moved wrong. Clouds on verdant. 7 drifted east to west, pushed by the thermal winds from the terraforming stations. This shadow came from above, growing larger, blocking out the small sun that hung in the sky like a dim lantern. He stopped walking and looked up. 17 creatures descended through the atmosphere, their bodies catching the light in ways that made Owen's eyes hurt. They were massive, each one the size of the cargo shuttles that came to pick up his harvest twice a year. But these were not machines. They moved with the grace of living things, their wings folding and unfolding as they adjusted their descent. Scales covered their bodies, shifting colors from blue to green to silver as they fell through the sky. Dragons. Owen had heard of them, but never seen one. The Karithi, people called them. Spacefaring creatures that migrated through the galaxy, following paths older than human civilization. They never came to farming moons. They had no reason to. The herd landed at the edge of Owen's property, just beyond his northern fields. The impact of their landing shook the ground hard enough that Owen had to steady himself. Dust rose in clouds around them. For a long moment, nothing happened. The dragons settled onto the red soil, their wings folding against their sides. Some of them looked thin, too thin. Their scales, which should have glowed with inner light, seemed dull and tired. 1 dragon, larger than the others and covered in scales that had once been silver but now looked gray, moved forward. She walked slowly, her legs trembling with each step. When she reached the boundary marker that separated wild land from Owen's farm, she stopped. Her head lowered until her enormous eyes, each one the size of Owen's chest, focused on him. Owen did not run. His grandmother had taught him that running from things only made them chase you. He stood still and waited. The dragon's mouth opened. The sound that came out was not a roar. It was something else, something that started deep and resonant, but then shifted, change, became almost like speech. The words were slow and carefully formed, as if speaking in human language caused the creature pain. "We are dying," the dragon said. Her voice sounded like wind through canyon rocks. "We ask for mercy." Owen looked at the herd behind her. Now that they were closer, he could see the truth of her words. 3 of the smaller dragons, probably juveniles, lay completely still. Their sides did not move with breath. The others gathered around them in a circle, their heads bowed. The living mourned the dead in silence. "What happened?" Owen asked. His voice sounded small compared to hers. The silver dragon's eyes closed for a moment. When she opened them again, Owen saw something in them that he recognized. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror 3 years ago when the bank tried to take his farm. Desperation mixed with stubborn refusal to give up. "The miners came to the outer reaches," she said. "Our breeding grounds, the crystal caves where we have laid eggs for 3,000 years. They destroyed them, took the minerals from the stone. When we returned from our migration, there was nothing left but empty tunnels and poison dust. We went to other places, asked for shelter, asked for temporary ground to rest. Every station, every colony, every settlement turned us away. Some shot at us. Most just said no." She paused, her breathing heavy. Owen could see the effort it took for her to remain standing. "We have been flying for 60 days without proper rest. We have nothing to eat but space dust and solar radiation. It is not enough. 3 of our young ones have already gone to the void. More will follow soon. We saw your fields from orbit, saw the mineral content in the soil. We do not ask for charity. We only ask for a chance to rest, to feed, to survive until we can find a new migration path." Owen looked past her at the herd. 17 dragons. Massive creatures that could probably tear apart his entire farm in minutes if they wanted to. But they sat quietly at the edge of his property, waiting for permission to simply exist in peace, his communication pad buzzed. The automated system that monitored his farm had detected the dragons and sent an alert to the colony administration. Within hours, maybe less, someone would come to investigate. The law was clear about harboring protected species without permits. The penalties included fines he could not pay and possibly losing his farm. Owen looked at the silver dragon. He looked at the dead juveniles. He looked at the fields his grandmother had planted, the land his father had defended, the soil he had worked for 2 decades. Then he turned and walked toward his equipment shed without saying a word. The silver dragon watched him go, her head lowering in resignation. She had seen this before. The silent rejection. The turn back. She began to move away, to gather her herd and find somewhere else to die quietly. But Owen did not go inside his house. He went to the shed and pulled out his largest plow, the one he used to break new ground. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The machine roared to life. Loud in the quiet evening, he drove it toward the northern section of his land, the part he had been saving for next season's expansion. Without hesitation, he began to plow new rows, turning the red soil, preparing the ground. The dragons watched in confusion as the human worked, his machine cutting through earth, making space. Owen did not stop until he had cleared an area large enough for the entire herd to rest comfortably. Dawn came slowly to Verdant 7. The small sun climbed over the eastern mountains and painted the plowed fields in shades of orange and gold. Owen had worked through the night. His back ached and his hands were blistered, but the ground was ready. He had prepared more than just space for the dragons to rest. He had opened his emergency water reserves, the ones meant to last through drought season. He had set up thermal regulators around the cleared area, machines designed to keep crops warm during cold nights. For dragons, they would provide comfort. The silver dragon stood at the edge of the prepared ground, staring at it as if she could not believe what she saw. The rest of the herd remained where they had landed, uncertain and afraid to hope. "Why?" she asked Owen. Her voice was quieter now, less formal. "You do not know us. We can offer you nothing in return. Why would you do this?" Owen wiped sweat from his face with a dirty cloth. He looked at the dragon, then at the herd behind her, then at the fields that had been his whole life. "You're here," he said simply. "You need help. That's all the reason I need." The silver dragon's eyes widened. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she turned to her herd and made a sound, a low thrumming that vibrated through the ground. The dragons rose slowly and moved forward onto the prepared land. They settled into the fresh soil carefully, as if afraid it might disappear. Some of them began to dig, using their claws to burrow into the mineral-rich earth. Others simply lay down and closed their eyes for the first time in weeks. Owen watched them settle, then walked back to his house. He needed to eat something and maybe sleep for an hour before the real trouble started. The trouble arrived before noon that a transport vehicle landed near Owen's house, kicking up dust and making enough noise to wake him from his brief rest. He walked outside to find a man in a pressed uniform standing on his porch. The man's badge identified him as an inspector from the consortium, the corporation that owned most of the mining operations in the sector. "Owen Barrett?" the inspector asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. "That's me. I'm here about the unauthorized creatures on your property. You have 48 hours to remove them or face penalties, including seizure of your land and equipment." Owen crossed his arms. "They're not unauthorized. They're my workers." The inspector blinked. "Excuse me, farm workers. Registered and legal. I filed the papers this morning." Owen pulled out his datapad and showed the screen. He had spent an hour before dawn looking through colonial law, finding an old statute that allowed farmers to register any being capable of labor as an employee. It was meant for human workers, but the language did not specifically exclude other species. He had registered each dragon by description, since they had no names humans could pronounce easily. Each one was now legally employed on his farm. The inspector's face turned red. "This is absurd. Dragons don't work. They can't be employees." "Says who?" "The law says any being capable of contributing to farm operations can be registered. They help with soil management, temperature regulation, and pest control. All legitimate agricultural activities." This was technically true. Owen had watched the dragons that morning. Their natural burrowing had turned his soil better than any machine. Their body heat, radiating from their massive forms, kept the surrounding fields several degrees warmer. And the large insects that usually ate his crops stayed far away from the area where the dragons rested. The inspector stared at him. "You can't be serious. Dead serious. Check the law if you want." "I did." The inspector left angry, promising that this was not over. Owen knew it was not. The consortium had power and money and lawyers. He had a farm and stubbornness. It was not a fair fight, but he had never expected fairness from the universe. Over the following days, more pressure came. Other farmers on Verdant 7 contacted Owen, worried that his actions would bring trouble to everyone. Supply ships threatened to stop delivering seeds and equipment to his farm. The colony administrator sent 3 messages demanding a meeting. Owen ignored most of it and kept working. The dragons, for their part, seemed confused by the entire situation. The silver dragon, who Owen learned was called Silverwing in human approximation, approached him one evening as he checked the irrigation systems. "We do not understand employment," she said. "My kind does not work. We migrate, we breed, we exist as free creatures. Why do you bind us with these human concepts?" Owen set down his tools and looked at her. "Because humans have laws. Those laws can be used as weapons or shields. Right now, I'm using them as a shield for you. As long as you're my employees, you have legal protection. Not much, but some. It might buy us time. Time for what? Time to figure out something better." Silverwing tilted her massive head. "You speak as if our survival is your responsibility. You're on my land. That makes it my business. But why do you care? You lose money protecting us. You face punishment. You gain nothing." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My grandmother used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it benefits them. It's what they do when it costs them something. You asked for help. Saying no would have been easier. But easy and right aren't always the same thing." That night, Owen discovered something unexpected. The waste material the dragons produced, filtered through their unique digestive systems that process space minerals, created the richest fertilizer he had ever seen. A small patch of wheat where a dragon had rested grew twice as fast as the surrounding crops. The stalks were thicker, the grain heavier. He ran tests on his equipment. The results showed nutrient levels far beyond anything commercial fertilizers could produce. If he could harvest normally with the dragons present, his yield would triple. Maybe more. This changed things. What started as simple charity now had practical value. The dragons are not just beings he was protecting. They were actively improving his farm in ways he had not anticipated. But Owen told no one about this discovery. Not yet. If the consortium learned that dragon waste was valuable, they would find a way to exploit it. They would turn living creatures into resources to be harvested. Some things, Owen decided, were worth keeping secret. The hearing room on Verdant 7 was the largest building in the colony, used maybe 3 times a year for important meetings. Today it was packed with people. Consortium lawyers sat on one side, their suits clean and expensive. Colony representatives filled the middle rows. A few farmers, curious or concerned, stood in the back. Owen sat alone at a small table near the front, wearing the same work clothes he had worn that morning in the fields. The planetary governor, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Wolf, sat at the high desk that dominated the room. She did not look happy to be there. "This hearing will determine whether Owen Barrett has violated colonial regulations by harboring protected species without proper authorization," she announced. "The consortium has filed a complaint seeking immediate removal of the creatures and penalties against Mr. Barrett. We will hear arguments from both sides." The consortium's lead lawyer stood. He was a tall man with gray hair and a voice that filled the room without effort. He spoke for 20 minutes about safety concerns, economic stability, and the importance of following established procedures. He showed projections on a large screen, charts and graphs that supposedly proved how Owen's actions could destabilize the entire region's economy. He used words like precedent and liability and public endangerment. That IT was impressive. It was also, Owen thought, mostly lies wrapped in professional language. When the lawyer finished, Governor Wolf turned to Owen. Mr. Barrett, do you have representation? No, ma'am. Do you wish to respond to these allegations? Owen stood. He had not prepared a speech. He had barely slept in 3 days. But he knew what he wanted to say. "They're my employees," he said. "I have the contracts right here. Each dragon is registered according to colonial labor law. They contribute to farm operations. They're paid in shelter and food, which is legal under agricultural worker statutes. Everything I've done is within the law." He placed his data pad on the governor's desk. She picked it up and scrolled through the documents, her expression unreadable. The consortium lawyer smiled. "Your Honor, this is clearly an abuse of labor regulations. Those statutes were written for human workers, not animals." "They're not animals," Owen said quietly. "They're intelligent beings. More intelligent than some humans I've met. That's irrelevant. The intent of the law says what it says," Owen interrupted. "It doesn't say humans only. It says any being capable of labor. If the consortium doesn't like that, they should have written better laws." Murmurs spread through the room. The governor held up her hand for silence. "Mr. Barrett, even if we accept your legal argument, the consortium raises valid concerns about safety and resources. These creatures are large and potentially dangerous. They consume water and minerals that could be used for colony expansion. What do you say to that?" Owen thought about the dragons, resting peacefully in his fields. He thought about Silverwing, who spoke with more wisdom than most humans. He thought about the 3 juveniles who had died before reaching his farm. They asked for help, he said. They went to stations, colonies, settlements. Everyone said no. Everyone had reasons. Good reasons, probably. But at the end of all those good reasons, beings were dying. I couldn't live with that. So I said yes. "That's sentiment, not policy," the governor said, though her voice was gentler now. "Maybe, but policy without sentiment is what created this problem in the first place." Before anyone could respond, there was a commotion at the back of the room. People moved aside as Silverwing entered. She had to lower her head to fit through the doorway. Her scales, which had regained some of their brightness after days of rest and proper feeding, caught the light and made the whole room shimmer. The consortium lawyers stood quickly, fear clear on their faces. Security guards reached for weapons they were not carrying. Governor Wolf raised her voice. "This is highly irregular. I ask permission to speak," Silverwing said. Her voice, deep and resonant, silenced everyone. "I am Silverwing, eldest of the Karithi herd. I wish to offer testimony." The governor looked uncertain, but nodded. "Very well. Speak." Silverwing moved to the center of the room. Even crouched low, she towered over everyone present. "For 3,000 years, my kind has migrated through this galaxy," she began. "We have seen species rise and fall. We have watched worlds be born and die. We ask little from the universe. Only the freedom to exist, to breed, to continue our kind. The consortium took our breeding grounds. Not because they needed to. The minerals they mined were not rare. They took them because they could. Because we had no voice in their councils, no vote in their decisions. We became obstacles to profit. So we were removed." She paused, her great eyes scanning the room. "We went to 17 stations seeking temporary shelter. 17 times we were refused. Some told us it was illegal. Some said it was too expensive. Some simply said no without reason. We did not ask for charity. We asked for a chance. One human gave it." Silverwing turned to look at Owen. "Owen Barrett did not help us because of law or profit. He helped because we needed help. This is not common in the galaxy. Most species, when given choice between compassion and convenience, choose convenience. Humans often do the same. But not this one. He risked everything he had built to give us a chance at survival. You call this a violation of policy. We call it the only moral choice anyone has made for us in 60 days of dying." The room was completely silent. Even the consortium lawyers had no immediate response. Governor Wolf cleared her throat. "Thank you for your testimony. This council will take a short recess to consider the evidence and arguments presented." The recess lasted 2 hours. When the governor returned, her expression was grave. This council recognizes the legal validity of Mr. Barrett's employment contracts, she said. However, we also acknowledge the concerns raised about resource allocation and long-term sustainability. Therefore, we make the following ruling. Owen Barrett may maintain the current arrangement for one seasonal cycle, approximately 8 months. During this time, the farm will be monitored. At the end of 8 months, the Karithi must either leave Verdant 7 or face forced removal. This is our compromise. It was not a victory. 8 months was not enough time to solve the real problem. But it was 8 months more than the dragons had before. Owen nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. As people filed out of the hearing room, the consortium lawyer approached Owen. You know this doesn't end here, he said quietly. 8 months. Then we'll be back. I know, Owen said. What he did not say was that he planned to use every single one of those 8 months. The days turned into weeks. The dragons settled into a rhythm on Owen's farm that surprised everyone, including themselves. Every morning, Owen would walk through the fields checking his crops, and the juvenile dragons would follow him at a distance, watching everything he did with curious eyes. When he stopped to examine a plant, they stopped. When he adjusted irrigation lines, they mimicked the motion with their claws, not understanding but trying to learn. Silverwing told Owen that young dragons learn by observation. In their traditional migration, juveniles would watch the elders navigate by star patterns, would study how to find mineral deposits in asteroid fields, would memorize the songs that mapped safe passage through dangerous space. Here, with no migration to follow, they observed Owen instead. IT should have been strange. Instead, it felt natural. Owen learned things too. He learned that dragons navigated by singing to the magnetic fields around stars. Each star system had its own resonance, its own note in the cosmic song. A dragon could hear these frequencies from light years away and chart courses through space using nothing but their voices and the universe's response. They showed him one night, the whole herd singing together, creating harmonies that made the air itself vibrate. Owen could not hear what they heard, but he felt it in his chest, in his bones. He learned that dragons did not count time in days or years. They counted in migrations, in egg cycles, in the slow drift of stellar positions. Their concept of history was measured in generations, each one memorizing the paths the generation before had flown. He learned that they had no concept of ownership. The idea that land or resources could belong to someone was foreign to them. The universe provided what it provided. You took what you needed and left the rest for others. The consortium's claim to the outer reaches, to the crystal caves where dragons had bred for millennia, made no sense to them. How could someone own space itself? The differences between human and dragon thinking were vast, but so were the similarities. Both species valued their young. Both created beauty for its own sake. Both mourned their dead and honored their ancestors. Both, it turned out, appreciated a good sunset. Then, in the 3rd month, one of the juveniles became ill. Brightscale was the youngest of the herd, barely old enough to fly atmospheric distances. She had been weak since arriving on Verdant 7, but Silverwing had hoped rest and proper feeding would help her recover. Instead, she grew worse. Her scales lost their color entirely, turning a dull gray-white. She stopped eating. She lay in the fields, barely moving, her breathing shallow and labored. What does she need? Owen asked Silverwing. The old dragon's distress was obvious. Mineral baths. In our breeding grounds, there are pools filled with specific compounds. Young dragons must immerse in them during growth periods. The minerals help their scales develop properly, strengthen their bones, stabilize their internal chemistry. Without these baths, juveniles can die. What minerals exactly? Silverwing described them. Owen wrote down everything she said, then spent the next 6 hours researching. Some of the compounds were common. Others were rare and expensive. A few were normally only used in industrial manufacturing. Getting enough of each mineral to fill a pool large enough for a dragon would cost more money than Owen had. He looked at his account balances. He looked at the price list from off-world traders. He looked at Brightscale, dying slowly in his field while the other dragons hummed their morning songs around her. Then he started making calls that he sold as backup generator. the one meant for emergencies. He sold his father's old tools, antiques that had sentimental value but little practical use. He sold harvesting equipment he would need next season. He contacted traders he had worked with over the years and called in every favor, every debt, every promise of goodwill. It took 3 days to gather everything. It took another full day to drain his largest water reservoir and mix the compounds in the exact proportions Silverwing specified. The temperature had to be precise. The mineral concentrations had to be balanced. Too much of one element would poison Brightscale. Too little would make the bath useless. Owen worked without sleeping. His hands shook from exhaustion as he made the final adjustments. Other farmers messaged him asking what he was doing, why he was bankrupting himself for a creature that would leave in a few months anyway. He did not answer them. When the bath was ready, the herd gathered around the reservoir. They lifted Brightscale carefully and lowered her into the mineral-rich water. The liquid glowed faintly, reacting with her scales. Brightscale sank below the surface and did not move. The dragons began to sing. It was not their navigation song. This was something else, something older. A prayer, maybe, or a vigil. The sound was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Owen stood beside the reservoir listening and hoping he had gotten the mixture right. For 2 days, nothing changed. Brightscale remained submerged, her body still. The herd took turns keeping watch, never leaving her alone. Owen checked the mineral levels every few hours, adjusting when necessary. He slept in short periods on the ground beside the reservoir, unable to go back to his house while the outcome remained uncertain. On the 3rd day, Brightscale moved. It was small at first, just a twitch of her tail. Then her eyes opened. Slowly, carefully, she rose from the mineral bath. Her scales, which had been gray and lifeless, now shimmered with a pale blue light. She was still weak, still thin, but alive. Definitely alive. The herd's singing changed. Joy replaced mourning. The dragons circled Brightscale, touching her gently with their snouts, welcoming her back from the edge of death. Silverwing approached Owen. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then she lowered her great head until it rested gently against his chest. "You gave more than shelter," she said quietly. "You gave effort. You gave sacrifice. This is not employment. This is kinship." Owen, exhausted beyond words, just nodded. That night, alone in his house, Owen looked at his account balance. He was nearly broke. He had sold equipment he needed. He had used resources that were supposed to last through the dry season. If his harvest failed, he would lose everything. But Brightscale was alive, and Owen realized something. The 8-month deadline was not enough. It had never been enough. These dragons needed a permanent solution. They needed new breeding grounds, new migration routes, a place in the galaxy where they could exist without permission from corporations that saw them as obstacles. He could not provide that. One farmer on one small moon had no power to reshape galactic politics or challenge corporate control of space. But maybe he did not have to do it alone. Owen spent his evenings in the colony's public data archive, searching through records most people never bothered to read. Old surveys, mineral assessments, territorial claims that had been filed and forgotten. He was looking for something specific, unclaimed systems with the right mineral compositions, places where dragons could establish new breeding grounds. The consortium controlled most of the valuable territory in the sector. Their claims stretched across dozens of systems, marked with legal documents and enforced by contract security. But the galaxy was vast. There had to be gaps, places deemed unprofitable or too remote to bother with. After 2 weeks of searching, Owen found 4 possibilities. Small systems on the edge of explored space. Each one contained planets or moons with crystal cave formations similar to what Silverwing had described. The mineral content was right. The environments were harsh, but survivable for creatures that could travel through the vacuum of space. There was just one problem. Making a legal claim to any system required filing fees, survey costs, and proof of ability to utilize the territory. Owen had none of those things. He barely had enough money left to buy seeds for next season that he sat in the archive late one night, staring at the coordinates of those 4 systems, knowing they represented hope, but having no idea how to make them real. His communication pad buzzed. A message from someone he did not recognize. The sender ID showed only a number, no name. Heard about what you're doing for the dragons. Heard you're looking for solutions. There are others like you. People who've been pushed around by the consortium. People who remember what it's like to need help and not get it. We talk. We share information. If you're interested, respond to this message. Owen stared at the words for a long time. It could be a trap. The consortium had resources and no reason to play fair. But it could also be real. People throughout history had formed networks, informal groups that helped each other when official channels failed them. He responded with 2 words, I'm interested. Over the next few days, Owen received messages from dozens of people. Small-scale traders who operated on the margins of legal commerce. Prospectors who had been squeezed out of profitable territories. Farmers on other worlds who had fought their own battles against corporate control. They shared a common experience. They had all asked for help and been told no by people with power. They did not organize formally. There were no meetings, no official structure. Just a network of communication. People sharing what they had and what they knew. That a trader named Ruth offered the use of her ship to survey the unclaimed systems. She had been transporting goods between outer colonies for 30 years, and new routes the consortium did not monitor. The prospector named Daniel provided detailed mineral analysis equipment. He had been forced out of his claim by legal technicalities and understood the importance of proper documentation. A colonial administrator named Yuki, working on a station 3 systems away, helped navigate the bureaucratic requirements for territorial claims. She had spent years watching corporations exploit legal loopholes and had learned how to use those same loopholes defensively. Credits came in small amounts from people who could not contribute time or resources but wanted to help anyway. 5 credits here, 20 there. Individually meaningless, but together they added up. Owen took all of this to Silverwing. I found possible locations for new breeding grounds, he said, showing her the coordinates. 4 systems. Each one has crystal caves and the right minerals. They're not perfect, but they're unclaimed. If we can establish legal right to them, your herd would have places to go. A new migration route. Silverwing studied the data, her ancient eyes reflecting the screen's light. This would require significant effort, she said. Surveys, claims, establishment of way stations. How is this possible? There are people willing to help. Humans who've been in situations like yours. They're contributing what they can. Why would they do this? They do not know us. Owen thought about that. Because you represent something. You're proof that the system is broken. When beings can be displaced without recourse, when asking for help gets you nothing but closed doors, people who've experienced that themselves feel it. They want to fix it. Maybe not for you specifically, but for the idea that someone should have helped. Silverwing was quiet for a long time. Then she said, for 3,000 years, my kind has survived by adapting to the universe as it is. We move, we adjust, we accept. Perhaps it is why we are dying. Perhaps survival requires more than acceptance. What do you mean? You humans fight. You reshape things. You refuse to accept the universe's indifference. It is why you're dangerous, but also why you endure. The plan took shape over the following weeks. Ruth would take her ship and survey the 4 systems, confirming the presence of suitable breeding grounds. Daniel would conduct mineral analyses to satisfy legal requirements. Yuki would file the territorial claims using a legal structure that designated the systems as nature preserves, preventing commercial exploitation. That IT was not much. For systems could not replace 3,000 years of traditional migration routes. But it was a start, a foundation, proof that alternatives existed. The consortium noticed. Of course they did. Corporate intelligence monitored communication networks, tracked resource movements, analyzed patterns. They sent warnings to everyone involved. Cease and desist orders. Threats of legal action. Most of the people in Owen's network had experience with corporate threats. They continued anyway. 3 months into the 8-month deadline, Ruth returned from her survey. She landed her ship near Owen's farm and walked out carrying data chips and a smile. Found them, she said. All 4 systems have what you need. The best is a place called Haven One. crystal caves that run for kilometers underground. Mineral composition is nearly identical to what your friend described from the old breeding grounds. Owen felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just the absence of hopelessness that he showed the data to Silverwing. She examined it carefully, then called the herd together. They sang their analysis song, comparing the new data to memories passed down through generations. When they finished, Silverwing turned to Owen. "It is acceptable," she said. "Not perfect, but sufficient. We could breed there. We could survive. Then we file the claims and make it official." Silverwing hesitated. "The consortium will challenge this. They will use their power to prevent it. Probably. But sometimes you have to try anyway." The old dragon made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are a strange human, Owen Barrett. Most of your kind would have refused us from the beginning. You not only helped, but decided our survival was worth fighting for." "Someone had to," Owen said simply. The claims were filed on a cold morning, exactly 6 months after the dragons first arrived on Verdant 7. Yuki transmitted the documents through official channels, registering Haven 1 and the 3 other systems as protected nature preserves under colonial conservation law. The language was careful, the legal structure sound. On paper, everything was legitimate. The consortium's response came within hours. They filed an injunction claiming the systems fell under speculative expansion zones that required corporate approval before any claims could be validated. It was legally questionable, but it would tie everything up in courts for years. Years the dragons did not have. Owen sat in his house reading the injunction documents when Silverwing entered. She had to crouch to fit through the doorway, her massive form filling the small room. "We are leaving," she said. Owen looked up. "What?" "The 8-month deadline approaches. We will not wait to be forcibly removed. We have decided to migrate to Haven, one regardless of legal status." "But the injunction, humans have laws," Silverwing interrupted. "Space does not. We claim what we need by right of existence. We have done this for 3,000 years. We will do it now." Owen understood. Dragons did not recognize human concepts of ownership or jurisdiction. They would go to Haven, one because they needed to, because survival mattered more than paperwork. "When?" he asked. 3 days. 3 days. Owen looked around his house, at the farm that had been his family's legacy for 3 generations. He thought about the wheat ready for harvest, the equipment that still needed repairs, the land that would need preparation for next season. Then he thought about Silverwing's words months ago. "You gave more than shelter. You gave effort. You gave sacrifice. This is kinship," that he made his decision. "I'm coming with you," Owen said. Silverwing blinked her enormous eyes. "You would leave your home? You need someone to help establish the first way station. Someone who understands human systems enough to make it legally defensible. Someone who can operate equipment and manage resources. This is not your responsibility." "No," Owen agreed, "but it's my choice." That afternoon, Owen listed his farm for sale. Everything. The land, the house, the equipment, the crops in the field. It sold within a day to an agricultural corporation that had been waiting for an opportunity. The price was fair, though not generous. Owen took the money and used it for 2 things: hiring a legal team that specialized in indigenous rights and conservation law, and purchasing a small transport ship capable of carrying supplies. Word of the migration spread. Ruth volunteered her ship to help transport equipment. Other members of the informal network contributed what they could: food supplies, construction materials, mineral supplements for the dragons, medical equipment. A dozen people offered to join the journey, to help establish the first way station. The consortium sent security forces to prevent the departure. They arrived at Owen's farm 2 days before the planned migration, armed and authorized to enforce the injunction. They found the farm already empty. The dragons had left during the night, their forms disappearing into the darkness of space. Owen's transport and Ruth's ship had launched hours earlier, following routes that avoided monitored space lanes, by the time the consortium realized what had happened. The migration was already underway. The journey to Haven 1 took 16 days. The dragons flew through vacuum, their bodies built for space travel in ways human ships could never match. They sang their navigation songs, finding their way through the darkness by listening to stellar harmonics. Owen followed in his transport, checking coordinates, monitoring fuel levels, making sure the small convoy stayed together. Other ships joined along the way. News of the migration had spread through unofficial channels, and people came to witness it. Some offered supplies. Others just wanted to see dragons flying free through space, reclaiming their right to exist. The consortium tried to intercept them twice. Both times, the sheer number of civilian ships surrounding the migration made enforcement impossible without risking a public incident that would expose their practices to wider scrutiny. Haven. One appeared on the view screens as a small moon orbiting a gas giant on the edge of explored space. It was not beautiful by human standards. The surface was rocky and barren, the atmosphere thin. But beneath the surface, the crystal caves ran deep and rich with minerals. The dragons descended first, their bodies glowing as they entered the moon's gravity well. Owen watched from his ship as they found the cave entrances and disappeared below ground. For 10 minutes, there was only silence. Then the singing began. It came from deep within the moon, resonating through rock and crystal, amplified by the cave structures until it could be heard even in space. It was the breeding song, the sound dragons made when they found home. Owen landed his transport near the largest cave entrance. He stepped out onto Haven 1's surface, breathing through a respirator, feeling the weak gravity pull at his boots. Ruth landed nearby, followed by the others who had come to help. Over the next days, they worked to establish the first way station. Prefab shelters went up, storage facilities for supplies, communication equipment to maintain contact with a wider galaxy. It was basic, rough, built from whatever materials they had, but it was functional. Silverwing emerged from the caves on the 5th day. Her scales glowed brighter than Owen had ever seen them. "It is good," she said simply. "The caves sing with the right frequencies. The minerals are pure. We can breed here. We can survive." Owen nodded, too tired for words. "You gave up everything," Silverwing continued. "Your home, your work, your life. For beings you barely knew." What? Owen thought about his grandmother, breaking ground on Verdant 7. He thought about his father, defending that ground against those who would take it. He thought about the choice he had made months ago when desperate creatures asked for help. "You asked," he said finally. "I could have said no. Would have been easier. Would have been safer. But you were dying, and I had the power to help. That made it my responsibility. Everything that came after, all the complications and costs, those were just details. The important part was the first decision, to help when help was needed. Not all humans would agree. No, but enough would. That's what I learned from all this. When I started trying to help you, I thought I was alone. Turns out there were hundreds of people who felt the same way. People who'd been waiting for a chance to push back against systems that value profit over life. You gave them that chance." Silverwing was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What will you do now?" Owen looked at the rough settlement they had built, at the ships in orbit, at the crystal caves that now sheltered a herd of dragons that had been dying. "Help establish more way stations. The other 3 systems need development. And there are probably other species out there facing the same problems you did. Maybe we can help them too. You would spend your life on this. Someone has to." News of Haven 1 spread through the galaxy. The consortium tried to suppress it, but the story was too compelling. Images of dragons in their new breeding grounds, of humans and other species working together to establish conservation zones, of corporate displacement being challenged by grassroots organization. It resonated with people on dozens of worlds. Other displaced species began reaching out. The network Owen had stumbled into grew larger, more organized. It was not powerful enough to challenge the consortium directly, but it created alternatives. Proof that different approaches were possible. 6 months after arriving at Haven 1, Owen received a message from Verdant 7. Governor Wolf informed him that the conservation preserve status had been legally upheld. The consortium's injunction had been overturned due to public pressure and legal challenges funded by the network's legal team. Haven 1 and the other systems were now protected territory. IT was not everything. The consortium still controlled most of the galaxy's resources. Corporate power remained vast, but cracks had formed in that power. Spaces had opened where beings could exist outside corporate control. Owen stood outside his small shelter on Haven 1, looking up at the stars. He thought about his farm on Verdant 7, about the life he had given up. He did not regret it. That farm had been his family's legacy. This, what he was building here, would be his own. Silverwing approached, moving quietly despite her size. The first eggs have been laid, she said. In 3 years, they will hatch. The first generation of Karithi born in Haven 1. That's good. We will name them in the human way, to honor what you have done. You don't have to. The first will be called Hope, Silverwing continued. Because that is what your answer brought. Not just survival, but hope that the galaxy can be more than corporate territories and closed doors. Hope that when someone asks for help, the answer might be yes. Owen smiled, something he had not done much lately. Hope is a good name. They stood together in the weak light of Haven 1's distant sun, human and dragon, watching ships arrive with supplies and new volunteers. The work would continue. More way stations would be built. More species would be helped. More alternatives would be created. All because one farmer, faced with desperate creatures asking for help, had given the simplest and most profound answer possible. Yes.